Hello everyone. Today we'll be getting into our new unit on congruent triangles, and our first lesson will be over angles of triangles. So for this first video, we're going to be talking about classifying triangles. So a lot of this should be familiar from your previous math classes, so this will just be a quick overview of the different types of triangles that we have. So first we can classify triangles by sides. And we have three different types of triangles by sides. We have scalene triangle, which this is when you have no congruent sides. You have an isosceles triangle where you have two congruent sides. So for instance, in this triangle, we have these two sides are congruent. And again, I know that because of these tick marks. If you recall, these tick marks indicate that these sides are congruent to each other. So you may see it like this, where there's tick marks, we know those are congruent, or you may just see that the length is the same. So let's say that these were both 5. Then that would also make this an isosceles triangle because these two sides are equal to each other in length. And then we have an equilateral triangle, and that is when we have 3 congruent sides. And so here I know that they're congruent because of these tick marks indicating that they're all equal to each other. Another way we can see that is that they all have length 7 or some number. And then we can also classify triangles by angles, and here we have 4 different instances of that. First, we see with an acute triangle, all angles are acute. And so if you recall, that means that they're less than 90 degrees. We have a right triangle, and that is when we have one right angle, like we see here. And then we have an obtuse triangle when we have one obtuse angle, and we see that angle right there is obtuse, which again, that is when it's greater than 90 degrees. And then we also have an equiangular triangle, and that is when we have 3 congruent angles. So I see that here with these arc marks, that's indicating that all of these angles are congruent to each other. And you'll learn about this later on in this unit, but that means that all of these angles are really going to be 60 degrees. So see, they're all the same measure. So let's go through some examples of classifying. So for these 4 triangles, I want to classify each triangle by its sides and by its angles. So looking at this first triangle, I want to first classify it by its sides. So I'm looking to see how many congruent sides does it have. Well, I see with these tick marks that all of the sides are congruent. So that means that it's going to be an equilateral triangle. I'm going to say equilateral. And then something that we're going to learn later on is that for equilateral triangles, all of the angles are also congruent. And so since all the angles are congruent, that's going to be my equiangular. So this is an equilateral equiangular triangle. Okay, and then looking at number 2, I'm going to first classify it by its sides. I see that I don't have any tick marks, and I can kind of clearly see that none of these sides are equal to each other. And so when I have no congruent sides, that is a scalene triangle. So this is scalene. And then looking at its angles, I'm looking to see, is this acute, right, obtuse, or all equal? I see that I do have one obtuse angle right here that is greater than 90 degrees. And so that means this one's scalene obtuse. Looking at number 3, I'm going to first classify it by its sides. I see I do have some tick marks here. I have 2 of them. And so when I have 2 congruent sides, that's going to be an isosceles triangle. And then I also notice that I have a right angle. And so that means it's going to be a right isosceles. Okay, now looking at this last one, I don't have any tick marks, so that means that I don't have any congruent sides. So since I have no congruent sides, that's going to be scalene. And then looking at its angles, I see I don't have any right angles because I don't have that box in there. I see none of them are obtuse either because none of them are greater than 90 degrees. They're not marked as being the same. And so I see that this one's going to be an acute triangle because all the angles are less than 90 degrees.